We are a podcast for product marketers and B2B SaaS who feel misunderstood of what they do.
From someone who truly gets what you do and
basically help you feel less like a misfit, being unignorable in your role. Hello everyone, welcome to We're Not Marketers. This time it's me doing the intro, and we have a very fantastic guest for you. But first, I'm just going to introduce him as it is. We are very happy to welcome Matthew Reeves to our podcast. Matthew is the CEO and co-founder of GoldPan. GoldPan is a win-loss agency, and they're also doing a lot of cool other stuff that we'll be able to break down, such as buying persona research and churn analysis. Matthew was a PMM in his career, and we're very excited to have it with him today. Before we let you ramble on a little bit, Matthew, I'll pass the mic to my co-host, Eric.
Yo, what's up, everybody? It's Eric, the Franken marketer, still thriving going into season 3, and we still got our excellent third co-host. So tossing it over to you, Zach.
Zach Roberts here, the sales water boy, or I always get it confused. I think that's the sales water boy. We'll check the show notes later. But Matthew, we'll pass it off to you. Really excited to have you on the show.
I'm very excited to be here. I've never been on a podcast, so it's quite nerve-wracking, and I'm expecting you to grill me with hard questions.
Think of it like The View, but just without Barbara Walters and Whoopi Goldberg and Joe Behar.
Okay, I've got it. Perfect.
So basically, we want to start the show, even if it's the third season, with the same question that we ask everyone for you, Matthew. Are product marketers actually marketers? Why or why not?
Okay, I could get into this. So I think I remember when you guys all posted this and it was a whole thing. Can you remind me what your guys' take is? And my answer, just that I can give you the answer right away. Of course, product marketers are marketers. Of course, if anything, I think other marketers are not marketers. So I think it's, of course. If anything, there's others are lying. Anyway, what are your opinions? What am I missing?
I don't think it really matters because you just dropped a big bomb on us. You said, just want to clarify for the audience, you said product marketers are marketers, but marketers are not marketers?
Yeah, that's the way I think it's more likely. Okay, so hear me out. What are you marketing? Product marketers, what are you marketing at all? A product or service. That's it. So here's what I think has happened in the history of the world. Products were there. They used to have ad teams that kind of distributed and did ads. And eventually that matured and it was marketing. Marketing was meant to sell a product. Somewhere along the way, marketing turned down a dark alley and started doing wacky stuff. Running Pinterest viral campaigns for a SaaS product that exactly 0 people looked at, or putting videos on YouTube that no one watches. So I think marketing took such a turn down a dark alley that now product marketers are saying, okay, we're strategic. We look at pricing. We link to the business goals. I'm that's always what marketing was meant to be. When did that go so wrong? So product marketers are marketers. Of course they're marketers. If anything, it's other marketers who are just off on their kind of island of dreams that are not marketers. So anyway, that's my take. Yeah, of course product marketers are marketers.
I love this.
I'm just still stuck on the dark alley. I'm still stuck on the dark alley visual. These people here uploading YouTube videos and playing on Pinterest. I think that'll stay up for.
I was trying to think of bad examples, but something that makes me really sad is when you see a company post hey, great keynote by, Billy, big ideas, watch it on YouTube, and you go and it's 4 views and it's been up for 3 years. Nothing makes me more sad than that. And I'm just some marketer has edited the video. They've added screens to it. They've added subtitles. They've done so much work and there's nothing to show for it. Anyway, that's a side tangent on just something that hurts my soul. One day I'll make a charity to get those videos views.
But I like this. I feel like a big part of that POV, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's coming from there are so many channels. Everything is so much digitalized that you need to know your shit, pardon my French. And because of that, we get so lost in the trenches. Marketers get so lost in the trenches into going really into how can I master this while taking their eyes off the foundation, which, from my understanding, you believe that PMMs, the majority of our work is of those foundation is to do marketing related to the product, right?
Exactly. And I think the foundations you're talking about are who is the audience? It's not true of every company. Often the price is somewhat fixed, but it really is core to marketing of like, how does this price? How do we bundle this together? What makes sense? And those are all the things we think of as PMM marketing tasks now. You hear a lot of people online, big PMM voices saying, PMMs are more like strategy officers. And I'd say not really. It's just that marketing has moved away. Like a typical marketing manager doesn't deal anymore with like pricing and stuff. I think what you're saying is much more channel focused. So they might be like marketing focused on content and they're dealing with a piece of the pie. And it's not to say that's bad. If you're growing a company, you need really good specialists who can be like expert at that channel. Like it's not a bad thing at all. But to say that product marketing isn't marketing because it's looking at all those things, I think is reading it wrong.
The idea was let's be controversial. And as we're season 3, we're VC back now.
I want to know about that.
All of that is just because basically by being contrarian with that, it's also the fact that we're giving a voice to everyone like us that felt like I want to categorize myself as outside of the marketing department. Otherwise, I'm still into those trenches. I'm still working in that. And I'm putting aside those tragic components that startups, co-founders, CEOs, anyone else don't understand how crucial those are and how time demanding they are as well. So this, at least, this is how we came with that narrative a little bit.
Yeah. And it makes sense. And I do think product marketers have a really hard job because working in software companies and working with loads of software companies, there's this weird dynamic out there, which is the development and product development world is pushing to be, whether it's agile or sprint based or Basecamp, and 37 Signals have a method called Shape Up. It's the idea that they constantly deliver lots of little value. Don't plan these epic, huge features that you don't know if people want. But if a team is constantly delivering lots of little value, lots of little pebbles to fill up the cup, product marketers are lacking this like big bundle that they want, which is like a big splashy launch. And it's weird. I think like software companies and SaaS companies are now, there's this tension between departments because their modes of working are completely separate. I don't have a solution. Maybe you guys do.
Of course we do.
We both. Oh, you got a solution because you hoarding the secrets. I don't got a solution.
Let's start a podcast with your 3 boys, and then just bring expert on until the problem gets solved.
Exactly.
That's magic sauce here. And now in season 3, I think we're ready to start cooking up that solution. But Matt, I think you brought it on. I think right up to the edge of how I feel, particularly how we started or positioned this in season 2, who brought up like the brand man used to be product marketing and now product marketing is its own thing. I feel like if you just talk about marketing, like if I go to the dinner table of my own family and they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm in marketing. They're like, oh, so you run social. Oh, you get emails. Oh, you set up forms to capture my information, right? Create YouTube content, whatever that is. I never feel like I can go to a table outside of the product marketing table and sit down and say, I'm a marketer. And people be like, oh, so you communicate with customers and figure out the biggest pain points. And then you transition that into some type of offer in a product that you can sell. And then you figure out how to communicate that to the audience that you're trying to best serve. It's never that conversation. It's always how many clicks are you able to get? How many views are you able to find? How many impressions are you able to get? It's never, okay, how much revenue are you able to drive?
Yeah.
That's why I think we say we're not marketers, because marketers are over doing that type of stuff. Whereas ideally, we'd like to be like, yeah, we're marketers. We're doing actual marketing that's been grounded for the last 100 years. But that's not the case.
Yeah. It's interesting because the way I think about it, my example with where product marketing came from, if you look at where marketing at all came from, it came from like the old like soap companies, I think, like the Procter and Gambles and those people. They started as they make a product, and then, like you said, Eric, there are brand managers types who they have these brands and they run ads and they run distribution. And then that kind of discipline, other companies were like, we need that. And it became marketing was the whole discipline. But if you look at like that, if the problem is that phrasing and people don't know what it is, I think product marketing is more aligned to a big B2C soap company's brand manager, where when you look at cosmetics brands, I think they're really interesting as a B2B person, that they on the shelf have rules of expensive. If you imagine a CVS or like whatever your pharmacy type store is, there's like pricing buckets on shelf height. An expensive moisturizer it can't be more than $50 in that kind of store, but it can't be less than whatever. So they deal with these pricing windows, and then they create brands within those, and then they create images depending on what the trends are. And I think B2B product marketing is more aligned to a brand manager, but it's all still marketing. It's what do people want? What do they value? How do we pair those things up with a product? And the underlying product is often pretty similar. It's still a soap or a moisturizer or a toothpaste. But there's loads of, you're describing the marketing task of wrapping that up in the planning stages before an ad has been expressed. But of course, all our family see is the ad. So that's what they think.
Yeah, and all my fiance,
Matthew,
Malta.
Matthew, a clarifying question for you. For product marketers going to be listening to him and be like, Matthew, I get you. Like, we should be doing win-loss. The reality being is that we have 27 different priorities and we got 40 hours in a week. How do you build a win-loss function knowing that reality that most product marketers today face?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question because there's a big win-loss player. Eric, I'll let you mention who we might be thinking of. But there's really big companies do win-loss all the time. And the way I think of it is if you're big and you have loads of money, you can do the gold standard thing. But most companies, and I suspect most people listening will be from smaller, still growing fast or wanting to grow fast, SaaS businesses, and all of those are time constrained. It's how fast growth happens. They hire good people who just work really hard. And I don't actually always think an always running win-loss function is what a company needs. I think often there's a pathway to it. So here's what I think most people need when they start win-loss is a product marketer can look at their funnel with a salesperson helping them and be like, we have an issue in this funnel. And that funnel to me isn't just sales. It's start a funnel into like demo, or if you're PLG into whatever sign up you care about. Then it's into kind of the first initial use, the onboarding stage, and then there's like through the customer journey. And different companies have different like issues. So some, they're just like spewing churn like crazy, and that's the issue, and it's all hands on deck about churn. Others, it's all about getting people through the sign up process. And I think you should take a problem focused win-loss view of, instead of, it's a big field. And I think you've got to narrow the field down and say, what's our problem here? Like, where are we focusing anyway? And then within that, sometimes win-loss is great, sometimes it's not. I think it's really good. And I'd even chop the win out. If you're cash constrained, I'd say just talk to losses. Like customers, you should have customers who'll talk to you. They're paying you. They expect you to be developing your product. And they're often SaaS companies who are willing to give some feedback. So if you want to pare a program right down, I say start with losses. Why did they not buy? And then depending on your maturity of the company, there's a whole bunch of like questions and scope within win-loss to do that. So I'm like a big advocate for very specific problem-centric win-loss. And then your question is like, how do you stand up a program? I think my answer is like, pare it right back, start minimally, and just get going. And don't be afraid of doing it DIY. Like, it's the same as any growing company. If you're starting a business and you have no money, you're going to be the one writing the content, doing the social media. When you get more advanced, you hire kind of experts and you can hand off pieces to specialists. But in the beginning, just go DIY and see what you can do.
Basically just ship it, right? Because we fall under the realm of planning, and then you want to get to up to that level when, as you said, sometimes it's just not required, at least to something, right?
Exactly. And I think here's what I think win-loss is really good at, or actually just talking to your customers in general, is that there's, in like research, there's two modes in general. There's one is like idea finding. And the analogy I use is when COVID happened, because people don't think about this part, is when COVID was breaking out, people were arriving on flights and they were sick. But no one really knew why or what they were sick with or anything. And a huge effort is just to document what's happening. And there were loads of misreads in there. You know, there's COVID symptoms flagged in the early days, which we now know were not real symptoms, but it's idea gathering. And I'm like, that is what talking to customers will get you. It will get you a ton of ideas. And where marketers go is they go, well, can't we just A/B test ideas? Can't we just use surveys? And I say that's the second part of the research, which is confirming, is this big? Is this true? Is this seen as a big pattern? So win-loss, not the be-all and end-all, but I think it's an amazing place to blank canvas and get like new ideas about why people are not buying from you. And that's why I'm like, just get started. I think people hate when people like me go, just talk to customers. But that's what I'm going to say. Hate it.
I feel like it's like this is something that we hear all PMMs say or approve or talk to customers. But then when you start going at it, there's guardrails, there's narrowing it down, and there's also being able to say to your boss, hey, can you stop gatekeeping those people? Can I actually talk to them and do a nice research? For PMMs listening right now, like I'm in early stage startups, I want to talk to customer and deep down a little bit more towards win-loss. Is there any triggers that you would recommend? And sorry if I put you on the spot, but any triggers that PMMs can leverage to be, okay, I know I have 36 things on my to-do, but I know win-loss would be a good way to start this program from scratch because of those triggers or those events that happened.
Yeah, I think one thing that PMMs often feel is they need and they want buy-in from other teams. So PMMs can be in weird positions where they like are creating positioning or messaging and they're handing it to sales teams and they don't feel sales want it or use it, or they're a factory of coming up with new messaging. The whole like kind of meme of like just creating one pages for everything. So I think a trigger is when a PMM just knows and has had another round of this team isn't using my resources, or they're saying, this isn't quite nailing it. The deck I have isn't quite working. Can we make a better deck? I think that's a good trigger. And like others are obviously, sometimes you have big meetings where it's like a Q2 results meeting, halfway point in the year, and it's obvious. There's like missed targets. A core project has come up, like we are going to work on competitive positioning, or a competitor is just destroying us in the market. Those are more like really black and white triggers. But I think the big one is gaining trust, like gaining trust from other teams. And I think often with sales. But one that you mentioned earlier that I think PMMs can use to their advantage is the challenge of getting buy-in from gatekeeping prospects. And we see this all the time, that it can either be current customers because there's a CS person or an account owner who has a great relationship with these. They don't want to screw it up. And the same with sales. They nurture these leads. They put people on a kind of keep in touch cadence where they're going to reach out every month. And they're like, just don't screw this up by talking about what went wrong. Really hard to get out of. And I think if that's the culture, the only real thing a PMM can do is they either can brute force and go in and be like, I'm just doing this. Kind of tricky. Just find someone who's more open and start with like sales like ride-alongs, as it were. So find a friendly, often high-performing sales rep and start and be like, we hear the messaging isn't quite working. I don't want to listen to a gong call. I want to sit on a live call and just get that sense of how a call goes, what slides you use, the questions you get. And I think have them introduce you as, hey, this is my colleague. They're learning the ropes of the product. They want to hear it from live. You just don't have to say anything and start listening and just build some trust, then see if you can ask a few questions. And once you've done that, you can say, hey, why don't I just see if you can take this call offline and say, I'd love to ask you more about product features. So I think that's the softer way, is build up to it if you're in a culture that's a lot more kind of guarded. But in my experience, actually, just to add this, I've very rarely seen somebody like screw up a deal because of this. If anything, it goes the other way, that someone's having a bad experience. They think maybe the rep's not listening or something. And the fact that there's a channel to get a human on the phone who will listen to you raises the bar. I actually think it's really the opposite. It's counterintuitive. I think people take part and they're not babies. And you say, do you want to take part in a call? And if they're too busy, they just won't take the call. Let them decide. They don't need to be handheld.
Knowing that piece where it, like, having that conversation might actually help the deal, and the challenge of product marketers building rapport specifically with sales. I'm curious, from your current experience with GoldPan or prior experience as a product marketer, what are suggestions of building that rapport with sellers? Because that's the thing we've heard a few times as a product marketer, of seller doesn't want to talk to me. Matthew, I'd just love to hear your take on that a bit more.
I guess playing therapist. So often our clients we're lucky that often they work with us because they have a decent enough relationship with sales. There's usually an understanding that something isn't working. And this win-loss or the research we're doing is almost a wipe the slate clean of let's go in and see if we can do this. I think if product marketers need to build relationships, they're all on the same team. Like, the whole goal is product marketers are marketers. We covered and solved this. Salespeople are selling. We're all on the same team. Like, these things should tie up. And if product marketing is shipping decks and positioning that sellers think doesn't work, then product marketers have failed at that job. And to me, it indicates like a trust issue. So I think, and this is probably really unhelpful, but product marketers just have to like be a bit humble and see how sellers do, see how they work. And I think what that means to me is find the best performing seller and form like inroads with that person or that team. And I think there's a few things in there that the best performing seller will have a sixth sense for kind of objection handling or what magic phrases like win deals versus everyone else. And if you're trying to get favor with the sales team, there's no better way than having buy-in from like the best seller or the 3 top sellers. If you can get those people on side, the rest should follow. So I don't know if that kind of answers the question, but I think it would work to, build inroads with them and do things like see if you can prove their assumptions. So often you might hear sellers say, we actually lose a ton because of pricing, or this other company's feature is way better. Like, it's way better. People love this feature. And I think it's a PMM's gut reaction to be like, we shouldn't talk about price. It's all value. And I think it's like very like knee jerk. I think PMMs need to actually go either try selling it themselves or take a kind of blank slate approach and be like, well, maybe that's true. And I need to understand, like, how does the buyer see this? Is it pricing? What is it about pricing? Why? And then help the seller overcome it. That was a rambly answer. I'm just like, make friends with the best seller. That'll help you.
No, that's not a rambling answer at all, Matthew. And what I really love about that is a few things. Is that when I was at Dropbox working specifically within the sales enablement function of product marketing, I used to have a monthly like meeting cadence with, like you said, the best performing reps, because I knew that the other sellers were more likely to listen to them than me when it came to enablement calls. And if I could get 3 of those individuals buy in, it was more effective on getting like adoption of whatever that we launched to the field. So I really like that piece, and it hides that and it highlights that underlying piece is that what happens a lot of times between the marketing sales collab is that marketing builds stuff, throws it over the fence to sales. Sales doesn't use it. Marketing gets pissed and then goes to the CRO and say, "Hey, we need a new sales methodology because sellers don't know how to sell."
Yeah, exactly. That does happen. And I think it's the other thing that I think is an assumption or a bad trait of product marketing, because it makes it product marketing task really hard, is when you think of positioning and messaging, like messaging stems from positioning, and positioning is completely relative to what else is happening in the market. Yeah, so that can be things like from what your competitors do or just the landscape. But the dumbest, most obvious example is actually we had a company we're talking to where they were the first to market AI company like 5 years ago. And of course, in 2 years, ChatGPT, all of that jazz is so easy to use. Everyone's got AI, and their like big differentiator, their positioning is just done. The context of the world changed. But product marketers want to finish the positioning. They want to be like, this feature has been positioned, done, and over the fence. And I think the annoying thing that makes their job really hard is that it won't be done because the world's always changing. And instead of being like it's done, I think the goal should be, this is dreamland stuff. I don't know if it's fully possible, but in a dream scenario, you get it 70% done as a PMM. You have, like you were saying, a team of great sellers, 2 or 3 great sellers who are like, okay, I'll give this a test. I am going to try and position this feature in this way, and I'll give you the gong call recordings and you can see how it goes. And have a period where it's like the learning period to hone it and then lock it in. I think that's the dream kind of way of delivering. Instead, it's like how they make movies. Make the movie, do some testing, do some more edits, ship. Instead, I think PMMs are often like, I finished and it's shipped. So I think that's the goal. That's the dream goal, is get a tester team of sellers who'll try and help you out.
I love it. And especially if you have the right guardrails in place, you will always have like triggers or moment when you can just go back, refresh, put more research around it. Because yes, I don't think I ever saw one PMM job offer where positioning and messaging isn't there. When you start asking questions, it's like vague at best. Like they don't understand it, which is something that it's a core part of the role. Why isn't it more clear, and what's their expectation out of it? They want leads, and this is a whole nother conversation. But I think if we have, as you said, let's not just have it done and then let it sleep on a drive somewhere. Let's have action items. Let's have guardrails. Let's make sure we can revisit it at some point.
Yeah. I think that, go on. My final point on that is going to be music to Clue's ears. But I actually think one of the big problems of PMMs and sales not getting along together is that they use different words for very similar things. Thank you. Finally, some representation here. But I think product marketers think in positioning, where it's, we do this and this is really good, and there's another way of doing it, which is our competitor's way, and we think that's not quite as good or not ideal for these people for these reasons. We use the phrase positioning. I think sellers think of that as objection handling. And I think there's so much, like they think of it as proactive objection handling. Eric will know all about this. There's tons of terms where it's, that Clue has a load of good ones where it's, I forget, you call it like landmines and other stuff, where it's these ideas are dropped proactively in conversations to help position the product. But I think the issue is, as well, product marketers are too tied to their own terminology when working with others. And if you're trying to build bridges, just stop calling it positioning and just be like, I'm going to help you with objection handling, because it's basically the same thing. Basically the same. Yeah, there's some tweaks around the edges, but that's all it is.
I really like that, because as really quick, Eric, is that as a seller, it's just like former seller, people are like, you just positioned the product wrong. And I'm like, thanks for your help. But Eric, go ahead.
I was just like, I look at it as you made it very Good observation there. Like, it's so similar to positioning. You're just using a different terminology. And what I've noticed as I've matured a little bit in my B2B SaaS space is all a salesperson wants to do is hit their quota, exceed their quota, right? Get a better bonus. And if the issue is pricing, right? Yes, on face value, people aren't going to be excited if you go do a whole pricing project. But at the end of the day, once you finish that, you implement it, and it's proven to drive more revenue for the business, your salespeople are going to be quite happy that you fix that problem for them, right? It doesn't have to be like, I don't think bigger science than that, right? You identify the problem, like you said, do some interviews around it, then validate everything around it, and make that change. And that's everything from product features to, pricing to, of course, the buyer journey itself. How are we providing this value there? And I think that's all the reason you need as a salesperson. And talking to a lot of them, they're all on board with that. If you can fix these gaps in my process, I'm going to close more deals. I'm going to hit my quota, and my bonus is going to be sweet.
Yeah. And sellers, their bonus, their commission is based on the price in the end. Like, they have as much incentive to keep that price high. They don't want a discount. They shouldn't want to anyway.
Until they're selling 3 times as many deals, right?
True.
One quick thing is that, so I'm going to give you a real life scenario here, is that some Salesforce like opportunity fields might incorporate win-loss information. As a seller, you're going to put in those details to give more upfront information to internal teams of what's happening. One challenge that might come up is that the lack of detail. When I was working in sales, and also on the other side, sometimes we would say, the reason why this loss was pricing. Price was too high. We should have discounted it too. And even with win-loss, where I've worked on some win-loss, and with some like colleagues or contractors, they'll put the same thing, pricing. The pricing was too high. From your experience of working win-loss research, what is the criteria of a good win-loss framework or research that goes beyond of saying price was too damn high?
So I actually have a really annoying answer, which is, I think it's really hard for sellers to get an accurate answer. And I would love to blame sellers and say they're just like lazy slobs who can't type 6 more words or use a drop down. And I know there's lots of people who do think that. But I actually don't know if the goal here is to understand when that product wasn't the right fit for a person, what made that the right fit? Or what made it the wrong fit, or what made something else the right fit? And I don't know if sales can get the accurate read on this. I don't know if it's just a flawed premise. That's not to say it can't be achieved by someone else on the team who may fill out that data, or you keep that data somewhere else. But I see it. Imagine you have a friend who's going on a date. They've been on Tinder or whatever is I'm married. I don't know what these apps the kids use these days are. They go on one of these apps, they meet up, and the person across the table from them has a sweet mullet, and they've got a snake around their neck. And this person with their snake, they're like, hey, do you know a good place I can get mice for this guy? Do you like mice? Do you like snakes? If you recorded that Gong call, you would, with Gong, this is a convoluted story, I swear it makes sense. You would hear the snake person go, I asked lots of questions about their interest. I probed a lot. I only talked 30% of the time. But they text me and said they just weren't looking for a relation now. And I think it's the same thing happens with sales, is that sales can be putting down all the wrong things, totally by accident. Someone was kicking the tires, they didn't know what they were looking at. And then they're given a nice answer. They're given a nice budget was pulled, so we're going to push this back a quarter. I don't think sales can get that. The other thing is, I don't always think buyers know themselves, meaning, I don't always think buyers know themselves. Meaning, Are you ready to go into the dark cavern of my mind, which is
Take us back to the alley. Take us back.
we're going into this is more of a dark mine, unexplored mine. But this is so I don't think people I think product marketers don't look at why people buy. And I think we lean on jobs to be done, which is just the role of a product. I think it's super flawed and hyped up, but that's another story. But when you look at people like assessing a product, I think there's more to it. They want to know, will this thing solve my problems? Efficacy. They're like, do I actually think this will work? And how quickly will it work? But they also have these other factors that they're not very good at talking about. One is risk. That pricing is in part of that, where they're like, if I go to my boss, okay, you couldn't go to your boss and ask $1 million for a logo redesign. I think every listener here would say they couldn't do that, but companies do that every year. This happens. So what that tells us is there's a financial risk that is different to other companies. And you don't want to be the idiot who reads the room wrong. So we know there's like a reputational risk, a financial risk. And the third is like a values fit. And we all know the cheesy phrase of there's no wrong, like everyone chooses Microsoft or whatever. There's no wrong idea when it's Microsoft. I forget the phrase. But it's basically
It's like
companies.
No one gets fired for using Microsoft.
Thank you. My down in the cave, I lost track of that. But basically what we're saying, it's a deep, dank cave. But what we're saying is there's a values fit. And you see it where any of us, if we were starting a podcast and doing a mailing list, we might use MailChimp. But if you're McKinsey, you're not going to send your emails from MailChimp. And if the CEO is like, what are you using? MailChimp. While it physically would work, you're going to get laughed out of the room. So anyway, recapping that, we know there's an element of efficacy, which is what win-loss reasons are all focused on. But there's two other elements. There's risk and there's values fit. And those are things that are really hard for people to express because it's second nature to them. That they know we're a fast-moving startup, so I naturally looked at fast-moving startup-y like tools. Or we're a kind of 30-year-old software veteran floated on the NASDAQ, so we looked at veteran kind of software-looking tools. And those are really hard for buyers to express, but much easier to get if you're like an outside observer. And like a product marketer can do that. You'll get a sense for it, but it's reading between the lines. So my kind of answer is I don't even know if there's value to keeping loss reasons. There may be some value, but I think they are biased to within a very small window of the world. So yeah, that's it. I'd say that use them if you want. If sellers hate them, that's fine as well. That's why you should check up and have an outside view, even if that's product marketing every now and again.
I agree,
Like
and I
GoldPan.
love it. I agree on like the fact that risk is something that we don't always take a look at.
Yeah.
But you said something about job to be done that there's some flaws, but when you talked about risk, it just reminded me the four forces of switching, right? What is pushing me to look for a solution? What is pulling me to a product? What are my anxiety of using it? And what are basically the effect of inertia if I stay with the status quo or with my current product? So I think if we're able to expand a little bit more on that specific framework, do you think that it can help PMMs understand at least the heavy lifting required to move for a specific software? It's like when I buy cybersecurity, technically I'm buying a lot more work on my daily workload because I usually, even if there's automation, I need to work more by using that solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like I think this goes into, so product marketers want to position the technical products, but I think those costs of switching and all of that, I think of them as risk, but the elements of switching, they align as well, where it's anytime you're making a change, you're giving yourself work and you're giving yourself risk that the new product actually won't be as good. If anyone's ever done a project where they've tried to switch a CRM, it's a nightmare. Sellers don't like change. There's all the data has to map. It's awful. And product marketers, I think it should actually be liberating because product marketers often feel they don't have a sway on a product, and they might not, but they can often have sway in other areas where it's pitching, we need a smoother onboarding process. And sellers, it's a whole lever of selling that can be used to like onboard. And you see it with really technical products. So an example that comes to mind is web hosting is like a race to the bottom. It's cheaper and cheaper like every year, but you get the company WP Engine, like WordPress hosting for business, and their whole pitch is like super amazing support, low enough downtime, but their whole kind of product marketing spiel is just great support. And I think it's a really big lever is de-risking a change that product marketers and sellers can team up and like use. And I think it can be a massive differentiator as well. But it's not a product as such. It's the whole like kind of package. Some people would say the whole package is the product.
One more big question for you, Matthew, is that you mentioned earlier is that for marketers, they might come in and say, hey, sellers, I know the market better than you. And I'm going to make stuff that you're going to use to get your job done.
Yeah.
Sellers are like, nah, you don't know anything. And then they now go listen to this gong call. Let's go back to this gong call example. And they're saying stuff that marketers are like, whoa, I didn't tell you to say that. But they're like, it's working. It's getting the job done. It's getting what I need to get done. I'm curious from your standpoint, when you've done win-loss research, has there been specific instances where you've brought up research and marketing's that conflicts with our brand framework? And if so, I'm curious, how have you navigated that? Because I feel that's been a pain to see.
Yeah. So we've had, not so much with marketing, and I think it's the nature of we're careful to take on projects where people are seeking change anyway. That's fine. But we have had experiences with teams who do not, the answer doesn't fit what they want to hear. It's often more likely, and this is a challenge where companies want to expand into a new market or a new realm, and the current market does not think of them as that realm. And I think that's a real hard challenge that you can't really solve. It's something people will be skeptical of you changing and being different. I think you had two kind of questions buried in there though, where one is on the disagreement level. Do you ever deliver answers people don't want to hear? And the answer is yes, all the time, or things people haven't considered. And sometimes or quite often it's a non-product thing where it's like the experience of buying wasn't good, or there was a bad feeling through the buying process, or another company just knocked it out of the park with their sales process. And that does happen where you're like, actually, it's just seller skill. And that's a really hard thing to deliver to a sales team. You need to deliver it to the leadership because it's usually a more structural thing. It's usually the actual sales team don't have the tools and the processes to be on the A game. So I don't think it's rarely individual sellers' problem. But you also mentioned the gong call thing, where is it working? And that's a really hard one to get to. And I would say there's actually the balance that needs to be like hit is different messaging is needed for every point along that journey. And one doesn't equal the other. There's this really old 80s Harvard Business Review detailed study where they talked to Ford, I think, about how people investigate new cars. And they're essentially, people would go to the dealership based on looks, and they would buy based on build quality. And they had all these like kind of matrices of how people, that's what people say, but how people assess those things. And they had a really boiled down version of those. And I think that is true of products where people will get a demo because the website looks slick. They might not say that, but as they progress through that journey, their education level heightens, and then they do get into deep feature comparison. So I think the message shouldn't be uniform. It should get progressively more detailed. And I think really good sellers, are good at delivering the detail as it's needed, and not going too detailed too early is like kind of the poison. I hope that kind of makes sense.
No, it does. It does. It's a very similar framework that I learned back in sales. And this was like the science of selling from David Hoffeld, is that buyers are going to always ask like 6 different questions across the funnel. And what you're describing is that not like the best sellers, one, are really good listeners, and two, they don't throw the kitchen sink at the buyer. They're like, I'm going to answer the question that you need to know for this specific instance, get your buy-in to see if that makes sense before we proceed further. And yeah. And I think one problem, like just when I joined the marketing side, is that marketing goes into enablement session and they're like, here's our positioning statement. Say all of this. And then a common feedback we hear from sellers is that marketing, I say this, but then buyers get overwhelmed.
Yeah. It's true. I think it's it's sellers have to be empowered to deliver the information at the right time. I think marketing it's much easier said than done, but marketing should be giving them kind of the party line positioning based answers. And I think more in like the spirit of the answer, like what is the feel and the value of this thing, and sellers a much better place to test it and try it on. It's much easier said than done. One thing I've seen, so way back when I was like a student, I worked in a popular phone company computer store, and you sell these computers, and I saw it day in, day out, which is the famous sales thing of once you've made the sale, just stop talking. And the level of detail can kill a sale. So seen it loads of times where someone would walk into this computer and they would say, come into this computer store and they'd say, I need a laptop that's portable that I can edit pictures of my family on. And a good seller is, how portable is portable? Are you flying every week, or are you like, I sometimes want to take it to somewhere else? Figure that out. Great, this is the computer for you. And they'd make a sale. And rookie sellers would be like, this one has 20 gigawatts of RAM and this one has CPU. And all of a sudden you've introduced all these factors that a buyer would go, I actually need to think about that. Like, how much do I need to edit a photo? And they just never needed to know this. And it was like by providing too much information, they created doubt. And I think the important thing is the seller wasn't ever lying to them. They were like, all of these will do what you want. Just this is the one I would go for. And I think that's a very simplistic argument, but I think it's also true in B2B selling that just give people the information they want and need to make a decision. And once that's done, you can make it available. But throwing the kitchen sink at them is pointless.
That's very well put. And exactly, if I need more information, I can provide that information without falling under the feature stacking where it's just, we have all of this, please buy us compared to another solution. While it's not because you have information that it will make an easier decision for the buyer. It's just become information overflow, and this is actually a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly. I have so much more beef I could go on. I could keep us here for 2 more hours.
No, I'm really liking this because as you're saying this, you're bringing back horror stories from me when I was in sales. And one specific example is that I was at an ed tech company and it was very product focused. Product focused being that you would talk to sellers and product people alike, and they would be like, we have the best product. Like, here are all of our features. The reality being ed tech was such a competitive space, and a lot of public schools in the US had no budget. So like you talk to teachers and principals and they'd be like, this is a really great tool. I agree with you. But I have 8 different school subjects, and right now we're being tested on math and reading. We're not getting tested on writing. So the answer is no. So like knowing what that piece you're saying there, Matthew, of giving the right information at the right time for what the buyer needs, that was really effective for me in selling. And there is a world where right now I feel it's like too much information. I agree. It is a bad thing. It doesn't help the sale. It slows it down from an example you brought forth.
Exactly. And different people, different prospects, different leads, all have different levels of that. And I think product marketers can help sellers be prepared. But the dream selling team is ones who can be dynamic with that information, who they get the point of it, they get the philosophy of the positioning, but they can deliver it in their own words and kind of play with it.
Awesome.
Do you want me to hate on something?
If you want.
I can pick on something. I don't know. I'll think of something.
Hey, quick question. Quick question for you, right?
Yeah.
Win-loss comes with the name win-loss, right? But obviously there's the opportunity to churn once you become a customer and renew.
Yeah.
Do you run any of those interviews?
Sure do. Great question. So the way I think of it, I actually hate the name win-loss because it's like a category that already existed, so it makes sense to use it for reasons. But I actually think it's more about understanding why decisions are made. And what you're describing is, one is a decision loss is a decision to choose a competitor, stick with what you've done. A renewal is actually the same. It's a decision to stick with what you've done, or it's to stop. This is more hassle than it's worth. That sucks. Or switch or upgrade. And there's actually so many paths in there. I don't have a better name for it. Send your answers on a postcard. But we do all of those. And I think it's all about decision making. How did people make a decision? And with customer experience or post onboarding, it's the it's the tie up of, did the reality match the expectation? So what did you think was going to happen and what actually happened? And if that expectation was too much lower than they expected the sales process, then you're going to be screwed in 12 months at renewal time.
Yeah, and I want to get your take here real quick. I actually am starting to value that side just a little bit more than the evaluation side, because to me it's like, all right, we've gotten married, now you want to keep going for another year instead of divorcing me. I think a lot of that information, we just, you forget about it, and that's why I brought it up, because the name win-loss naturally pigeonhole you into just the evaluation stage instead of the renewal stage.
Yeah. I think also the churn is super valuable, churn decisions. There are some challenges with it. So the great part of a churn analysis thing is that, let's say someone has to offboard via a CS team. So I'm not talking like a cancel button, but they talk to their rep and they have to get data migrated and stuff. It's a great place for a rep to say, I'm going to set you up with the product marketer. They love to hear this. They're not going to try and change your mind. They just want to deep dive. And you get a much higher acceptance rate. And second, because someone's like mind is made up, they are just going to let it fly. Like they are way more candid with their answers. And it's really valuable. And if they remember the sales process, so the downside is it's now probably 12 months, maybe 24 from the sales process. Maybe they weren't involved, but you do enough of them and you'll get information on that early experience. But yeah, I love them. I think for me, loss and churn, best. Just interview the negatives. I think you'll learn way more. Wins get to round out the picture, but yeah, the losses are way more fun.
Yeah, I look at wins as just pats on the back. The losses is where you can actually do stuff with it.
I think if you're going to interview wins, go in as devil's advocate and be like, why, what did we do wrong? There's a great question out there where it's like, if for some reason a manager or someone was like, okay, sure you chose Clue, sure you chose GoldPan, but your manager said you can't use them for some reason. What would you have done and why? Would it be a product? Would it just stick where you are? Would it have been something totally different? I think you have to go in and just avoid the pats on the back. Like, it's pointless looking for compliments. Like, you'll learn nothing from it. So yeah, that's my take on that. But I think the negatives will give you that way more honestly. Especially if you give people permission to be as negative as they like. It's great fun. I enjoy it. If anyone wants me to talk to someone who's angry at their company, send them over.
You'll be happy to take a return interview.
Yeah, do any of you three, I think I might have asked you on LinkedIn messages, but have you had any sales calls yourself where you're the buyer lately and the experience was really good or really not good? And you can't choose your own company, but Have you had any of those lately?
Oh yeah, I'd say 3 over
Oh yeah,
6 months that I would be like, y'all should do a win-loss interview with me.
Yeah. Did you tell them? Did you email someone and tell them?
What, the feedback, or tell them they should do a win-loss interview?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've
both.
typically give them, like, I'll set up a call with them and I'll give them the feedback to their face typically, but they don't ask a lot of questions.
Oh man,
they're not inquisitive because it's the salesperson. They're more like, fuck, I lost my opportunity. Is there any way I can save it? As like knowledge gathering.
And it makes them look like an idiot. And it sucks. Like, the other thing I think we have to be reasonable with is everyone has off days. Everyone's like thrown. Sellers can't be judged like 100% of the time. Like, mistakes are going to happen. But it's the leadership's job to make a process where it happens as little as possible.
Exactly.
Eric, one day I want to get on a call. I'm going to interview you of a bad sales experience. We'll record it. We'll bleep the company name. And then we'll just put the audio out online and we'll send them the link.
There we go.
How does that sound?
That's perfect. Get it out in the wind. People need to know.
Yeah.
That I need better buying experiences here.
This is a genuine segment podcast thing I actually want to do. And I've got a few people who are on the hook for it, but people are nervous to do it. So I've said I'd bleep out company names.
No shame. You can leave the company names in mine for my segment if you want, but yeah, I love it.
Sure. I would love to. You could be my first interview.
Guinea pig at your service.
The last story that I wanted to share is, like, Matthew, what you shared here is that a really bad sales experience recently was, I guess, I don't think I told you one about this, but there was someone that was advertising a new AI service for podcast editing. And context being is that as we continue doing recording, like, what a lot of people may not know about podcasting is that editing can be a very manual effort. And when I heard this, I was like, oh, okay, I'm curious. Hop on this call. This was like a bait and switch. He's like, we actually don't have the AI built, but we do have this service for editing podcasts. And I was just like, okay. So I'm like, I'm going to still be open hearing more about it. And I'm going to be upfront. I'm like, hey, our primary focus right now is just time. It's just really time. And then he's just, actually, you should really focus on podcast quality. And I was like, that's not a problem right now. I said the problem right now is time. You should do double editing. You should double edit your podcast. I listened to your podcast and it sounds like you guys do a one edit. I was like, yeah, because we don't have enough time. But it was just like, to the end, it was just like, I ended up not working with them because I was just like, one, like, I'm telling you the problem. But like your earlier example was just like, you're throwing in these different variables that I'm not going to be evaluating on the decision on.
They were kind of brute forcing their way from your story. I feel like you had that kind of vantage point that, hey, this is why I want to talk to you. And you were very clear. It seems that it's time. And we don't have the bandwidth. Like, we split the editing between the three of us. We don't have the bandwidth of just doing it as well a second time with someone else because we don't trust each other for some reason or whatever. But yeah, I feel like brute forcing, especially in a sales discussion that should be more conversational than transactional, is never a go-to.
It's not a go-to.
And here's where I have my beef with. Let me get into my hornet's nest beef with features and benefits thinking. That going back to rookie selling computer stuff, they have this methodology for features and benefit selling. And again, this is like frontline sales though, where their view or the training would be that buyers have a value. They value something. And that could be a very specific technical thing. Or in your case, it's just time. This isn't your full-time job. You have lots of other responsibilities. And if you can save time, that's what you value the most. And your job as a seller is to take a feature and make that equal beneficial for time. And that pathway is the benefit. I think marketers do a weird job where they don't see it as linked to a buyer value. They take a feature and they say, why is this feature good? And they go, this is good for 7 different reasons. And I think a different way to think about it is when our buyers come to the table, What value are they seeking? What is their problem and what value do they care about the most? And some will say like they just want to, like in your situation, you probably are okay with the podcast quality. Everyone wants quality better, but there's a level you're good with. But what you really are lacking is time. And maybe their pitch of being like, how much, they could have done that pitch over with a like, well, how much is your time worth to you? So you got 3 of you, you all make good money. You're all spending how long doing this? What if they could have, even if you weren't ready, I think planted that seed in there that, now we're VC backed and we're all kind of driving our Mercedes around from this sweet podcast cash.
No, but we want to get a scooter though, right? We want to get just a really entry-level scooter so we can visit each other.
That works.
Yeah, I'm thinking like a 4-way bike, and then we have a seat for Matthew on.
Yeah, tandem. Yeah.
That's how we'll record our podcast for season 4. It's just on a 4-seater.
Yeah, you've all got to be in the same city, and it's very bad for audio. But I like it. It's different. They say there's no bad ideas in brainstorming.
That's exactly right.
Let's just put that on the wall.
Frame it. Matthew, curious here from your standpoint here as we're rounding out the conversation. How can people find you? How can people discover your work outside of LinkedIn, on LinkedIn? Love to give you the floor to share more on that.
LinkedIn, one channel, LinkedIn. Don't mess around. That's where I am. Matthew Reeves of GoldPan. You'll find me. I'll probably be talking to the Anthony Pieri and his siblings, trying to get an invite for Christmas Day to their house. That's my life mission. So you can help me with that by connecting there. If
you do talk to him, ask him about why Anthony hasn't bought a sweater from our merch store yet, because he left me.
Oh, he hasn't? Okay, he left you on red? Okay, I'll do that. And the other thing is that I want to hear is, if people have bad experiences as being a buyer, in general, they've been on a sales call and it was fine, or on the other side, really good, I would love to talk to them. It can be totally anonymous. I won't share their name, but I'd love to hear what works and what doesn't work. I love it. Message me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Matthew, it was an amazing episode. I feel like season 3, it's a very interesting subject that I feel like we covered a lot, but I'm hungry for more. Folks should follow you on LinkedIn, and if people are listening, you can message Anthony Pieri and say, hey, why is Matthew Reeves invited to your Christmas supper yet?
Yes, that's what we need. Call to action.
Exactly.
Yeah, really fill up his inbox with those questions.
Yeah, I was going to
get
you.
He's not busy enough.
And be careful, because you'll be asking questions to a guy who asks questions for a living as his job. So you're in for it.
Yeah.
Good.
You end up buying a positioning course from him.
Matthew, thank you for joining us on this awesome Friday. And that wraps.
This was a lot of fun.
How much fun? 1 out of 10.
I am 1 out of 10.
First podcast.
Oh, huge. Let's do Spinal Tap 11.
Oh!
It was great.
Oh!
11 on the fun scale.
We break scales over here. That's awesome. Matt, I know we had a heck of a lot of fun. Great time, and I could talk about win-loss all day, but we try to keep our episodes pretty tight. But maybe we'll get you on for our next one. And that wraps
it
for another episode of We're Not Marketers. See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to We're Not Marketers. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe, review our podcast, and share this episode with other PMMs. Thanks again, and see you soon.